Hello, everyone. I'm Blanca, and I am the creator of the First Gen Survival Guide on Instagram. I'm here with Andrenna, who is a government lawyer in the DC area, and she is a First Gen student and is in the First Gen profession, and she'll be sharing more about her story.
Thank you so much, Blanca, for having me on. I love watching your Instagram, especially the new stuff that you have going on. And it's really amazing that you find all the time to do that with your caseload. You're an undergrad. And I just think that's so impressive. So like you said, I'm a practicing attorney in the DC area. But before that, I was a first gen student, a child of two Central American immigrants who came here in their teens. And I'm from the Southern California area, LA, and that's where I grew up my entire life before moving to DC. I definitely had a long educational journey. I did not go straight to university after high school. I had a really hard time with the SAT, and I was not happy with the options I had going to school. So I decided to go to community college. And I ended up only being there for a year because then I transferred to USC a year after community college, graduated, took a couple of years off, and then eventually found my way to law school on a full tuition scholarship, and started practicing in what's kind of referred to as big law, which is larger law firms that are international, doing corporate class action and employment work. And I did that for about 5.5 years. And I recently moved to the Department of Labor, where I'm still doing employment law, but I'm protecting worker rights and still doing litigation, though, still going to trial and appearing in court. And that's kind of my background in a nutshell.
Wow, that's incredible. That is also a workload because you also have a dedicated page to first gen students. I'd like to ask what's the name of your page and what's your mission with the page and your statement out there on social media?
Yeah, so I have a couple. I'm on TikTok. It's FirstGenFlourish, and I that one's really dedicated to talking about kind of the first gen experience and giving practical advice. So right now I'm doing a series on bar exam tips. So I'm giving daily tips for how to get ready for the bar exam. It's a little bit mixed of strategy, but also mental health tips to get through the anxiety of the bar exam. And then I recently started a YouTube channel with the same name, First Gen Flourish, and that carries the same mission. That allows me to do more longer form content talking about the first gen experience. And ideally, with that, I'm also going to be launching a video podcast where I can get more in depth on some of these issues. I already did one brief episode where I was able to interview two law students, one from Harvard Law School and one from Michigan. And they recently started a nonprofit organization geared towards providing low income students who are interested in law school free LSAT course, free admissions counseling, and they did all of that while they were they were both 2Ls at some of the hardest law schools in the country. And I'm just so amazed by the kind of the creator economy that's developed over the last couple of years, and first gen students of color really wanting to share their stories, and it's really inspiring. And I think there's a lot of pages that talk about how to get to law school, how to pass the bar. And I think there's less about what happens when you actually achieve your dream. Like what happens when you become a lawyer and you're in a law firm. You have to start making decisions about money. You have to start dealing with family on both ends because you're part of the, sandwich generation. And, what kind of mental health struggles happen then and how do you overcome that? And I'm really proud of where I am now, but it took a lot to get here. And people only see kind of the external part of it. And social media likes to glamorize a lot of it. And I do enjoy, a lot of the opportunities I get from my job. But at the same time, not a lot of people want to talk about the vulnerabilities that are there. And I am I really want to share that vulnerability so that people know that they're not alone, and they're not stupid questions to ask, that this is all kind of our process of growing. And I think for a lot of us who have benefited from pipeline initiatives, who have benefited from mentors and sponsors, who, we were able to find someone we could actually go to. There's so many of us who don't have that. And if that's something that I can do to scale the impact by, talking to, hundreds of people rather than, just one person I'm mentoring one-on-one, then that's, worth it for me.
And I'm glad that we were able to connect. And, I've learned, even from our pre interview, I've learned so much. And there's so much more to learn out there. And, as we are working with each other to build this community, to strengthen the information and, build upon that bridge for first generation students to get the information, but also have that container where they can share with each other. But I did want to ask about your educational route, specifically the community college route, and the process of going through it, what benefits you gained from it, and how your overall experience was from
Yeah.
moment in your life.
Yeah, hands down, going to community
Mhm.
college was the best decision I made for myself, period. Like I mentioned, I did not do very well on the SAT. I've never done well on standardized tests. And I I didn't have the resources to be able to do the fancy SAT prep course, and I did as much as I could self-studying. But I mean, I was also working, and
Mhm.
I was going to school, and then I was working on top of that, and I was, on the debate team that would travel across the country, and I really enjoyed doing that. And ultimately, I didn't perform very well, and I was really frustrated when I was going through the college admissions process as a first gen. It was really hard to navigate, and I got rejected from so many schools. I didn't have very many options. And it's not that I thought I was better than any of the schools that I had gotten into. It's just that wasn't the dream I had for myself. And they didn't have the programs that I wanted to study. And I knew that I could get there if I needed to and if I really put the work in. And I knew that once I got there, I could compete, head to head with other students who were at that school. And I was really lucky because I had gotten a scholarship to go to a Catholic high school in the area, and there it went with people who had more resources than me. And I saw some of the people who, got into some of the universities I wanted to go to, and I'm like, I'm in class with them. I engage with them on a daily basis. I can do this, and it's really just this structural barrier that stood in my way. So I made the decision to go to a local community college near me, and I knew it was the right decision. And I'd done a lot of research into it, but I have to say it was really hard, because it was competing with kind of the stigma of being a community college student, and that didn't just come from, oh, what are my classmates at my private school going to think about me if I say I'm, going to the community college down the street, but like, what's my family going to say? Because, to them, the traditional process was you just go straight to a 4-year university. And I went to this really nice private high school. And because I went here, I should easily just be able to get into this university. And what are people going to think? And they hear so many rumors about people go to community college and they don't make it out. They don't end up transferring. They end up, it's a dead end for their education. And I had to have difficult conversations with members of my family being like, no, like I got this. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I benefited from this amazing pipeline program that UCLA provides called the Summer Intensive Transfer Experience, where they, put you on campus for 3 days and they tell you everything you have to know about college, financial aid, the transfer process, how to pick your classes, how to strategize. And it gave me my kind of roadmap to success. And like they actually put you up at like the dorms there. So, for my family, they saw me moving into a UCLA dorm, even though it was for 3 days, but like, you take all the pictures, you like look at the UCLA ID. But I knew in that moment what I wanted. And I really had to come back to that and reflect on my story. And that was a really strong year. I didn't graduate. I had a 4.0 when I was applying to USC. USC, unlike the UC schools, once you have 30 units, you're able to transfer. At least that's how it was back then. I don't know how it is now, but I was able to transfer after a year. And I almost didn't apply, and I ended up applying, and I got in, and I got in with a lot of money. And the decision was really easy. And and it didn't stop my success. I had saved 1 year of tuition, which was amazing because it was so inexpensive to go there. And I didn't feel like I was behind or hurting my education at all, because when I got to USC, I got a 4.0 my first semester, and I graduated summa cum laude, which is the highest honors you can have, and Panhellenic valedictorian. And community college didn't stop any of that, but it definitely gave me the opportunity to customize my education and be able to get my head on straight before I made the leap to USC. So I'm a big proponent of community college, huge proponent.
Wow. No, I definitely can see that. And I definitely relate in regards to seeing the benefits and the great rewards that you gain through community college, the preparation, but also the expenses, or the lack of the expenses that are there because of the amount of funding that you get from community college and the other stipends and programs. So I also do well indeed like advocate for community college and really endorse it for a lot of students who are interested in going to school and want to see a different alternative. Because from my perspective, while I was in high school, we didn't really talk much about community college because, again, like you mentioned, the cycle of staying in community college longer than 2 years now. Now it's expected to take on to 2 years a minimum to transfer to a university. So a lot of students were with sitting with the fear of staying longer than 2 years at a community college, and never going to transfer, or never even completing their associate's degree. So there are a lot of I would say um, misconceptions about community college. And with that note, I did want to ask about, the after the transfer, after your university transfer, how was your mental well-being? Because I think that's a big topic that a lot of first gen students maybe obviously confront, may approach, but not really talk about. They never really had the limelight or the spotlight to actually share those experiences, or even identify them within themselves. So how did you deal with that, if you even came across or learned how to navigate that?
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely, especially when you go to a school that has as much privilege as USC. Um, People call it the University of Spoiled Children. And I didn't have the money for to relate to that. But, there are a couple of things. The first was I was kind of riding a high from community college and even getting in to USC. Um, I was so happy and I was so pumped. And in some ways, going to USC felt like a little bit of like a homecoming, because, I'm from LA, and, my great grandmother's house it's right down, like right there off of Vermont, so close to USC. So to me, the good Nicaragüense restaurant, it was
Mm-hmm.
just on the other side of the 10 freeway. Like I knew where to get the good pupusas. Like that was my neighborhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and honest, and there were times where it was tough, where I felt imposter syndrome, and all that happened. But I had my family support network near me because they're in LA, but really had the community. And I would go to the rows on Adams. And I remember this one time there was someone at the checkout stand who saw me with the USC shirt and asked me if I went to USC. And I'm like, yeah, I do. And then the person was like, Mija, I'm so proud of you. Like, good luck. Like, you're going to do great. And like, you have that. And I think it was at that point where it's just like, look, this isn't just about me. This is about, there's so much more. There's like my community. Really tried my best to form community where I could, whether that be the, Latino student assembly, whether that would be through, I was really into political science. So the Institute of Politics at USC, I was able to kind of find my people. And, Latino or not, people who I had similarities with, and focus on my strengths and what my passions were, not what I thought was like the cool thing to do or the fancy thing I needed to do, but like what did I need to do at school to satisfy my strengths and my passions now that I'm here and I have so many opportunities available to me. Even though those things took a lot of time, if I had just sat in a library and studied all day and isolated myself, I would have done myself a disservice. I think it would have been bad for my mental health. And I don't think I would have gotten nearly as many opportunities as I ended up having there, because so much of the benefit of going to one of those schools is the new connections that you're able to form and the people you're able to meet, and those kind of carry over decades later into your life. I mean, those connections I formed years ago come back every week. It's amazing to see how like a tumbleweed, it just keeps getting bigger.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, and I definitely wanted to take advantage of a lot of the mental health resources on campus. Like we were able to get subsidized counseling. So I did see a therapist during college, and I thought that was super helpful. And, I tried to incorporate my family as much as I could in my college. And, of course, they can't help you study, but I had like little traditions to kind of bring back joy around finals time. So, like, one tradition that I have is my mom and my Lita would always cook for me for finals week. And then they would bring like in their Tupperware tubs and, the food. And I would eat really, really good while I was studying for finals. And that just brought up my level of joy because, I had good associations with, those type of foods and good memories. And like, you can find ways for people to support you, even if it's something as small as cooking your favorite, foods during your most stressful periods.
Yeah, most definitely. I do remember. Or I know those feelings, those moments of the homemade food. My biggest question would have to be, how did you process the tremendous amount of weight, like the stress of, knowing that you are the first student, the first generation in your family, the first Latina entering a space? How did you manage that? How did you, see yourself in a greater position than you were at that moment? Did you overwhelm yourself with the different career opportunities you were going into, or did you know you were gonna go into law?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I did think from a really early age that I was going to go into law, but this was around the time I graduated from USC in 2011. So what happened while I was in school was the Great Recession, the financial crisis. And you saw law firms laying off entire classes. You saw an entire law firm collapse with Dewey and LaBeouf. And the idea of going to law school and taking on a ton of debt during that time was terrifying. Um, and it felt so unstable. And there were people who I saw who were mentors that lost everything. Um, and suddenly becoming a law school became a riskier proposition. So I had to make the decision to kind of step back and not apply straight through. And so I didn't. I took a that's why I took time off in between. And that was a really controversial decision. Because once again, there's the stereotypes of like going straight through, right?
Mhm.
And when I told people that I wasn't going to go apply straight through, the answer is like, well, you're never going to go to law school then. Like, you've already taken the test. You're not going to take that test again. Like, you're not going to go, and like, you're not going to be a lawyer. And like, there's, even if they believe you'll succeed, like, there's still like a little disappointment like in the
Mhm.
background of them, of you not going straight through. And that's really hard to process because it's really easy to doubt yourself. Like, you're already kind of doubting yourself. And then when you see that, it makes it a lot harder. And it really did take having to talk to a lot of people to kind of get over that. But I did. And ultimately, it was the best decision for me. I felt all around that I learned so much during that time. And I did not have to retake the LSAT because your LSAT score back then was good for 5 years. So um, I just knew in my heart that that's what I needed to do. And I trusted myself to take a chance, and I just did it.
Wow. And just like you mentioned, how you realize that, maybe family members and other relatives may have imposed like a preconceived notion that you may not take it again, may not, even go to school, those thoughts that are already predetermined for your future. um, that's something that a lot of first gen students sit with. And it's something that I've experienced myself, personally as well. What advice would you have for students going through that, managing that weight on their shoulders? Or who could they turn to? How can they just really manage that, or just, finding ways to cope with that stress?
Yeah, I think this is why it's so important to, when you're an undergrad, to really go to those networking events, to go to the panels where you hear people talk about the career. We don't know a lot of people as first gens. I mean, that's one of the struggles that we have, that we don't have the connections. We don't have a ton of family members who are lawyers or in politics, and we don't know what it means to, take time off. Like, what is the road back? What makes a competitive applicant for, a top law firm? And something that I always loved was, I'm really extroverted. So I would go to those panels and I would go to those networking events, and there was a ton of free food. And if it was one of the fancy places, maybe some free wine, and I love free stuff. So I would go to all those, and I would, talk to people, and I would try to follow up with some of those people. And I think that was instrumental in me feeling comfortable with the decision not to go straight through, because even from like that small cohort of new people I spoke to at all levels, right? Like entry level people who are in grad school, people at the highest levels of government, like feeling comfortable with going to the events, hear their story. If there's something in particular that connects with you, waiting till the end of the panel, introducing yourself. If they give you their business card, follow up with them, email them, set up a quick like 15-minute informational interview. I did that a lot in college, and I thought that was super helpful to me because I had people who became my sort of like brain trust, and some of them did come from similar backgrounds, but not all of them. And it's good to have kind of your choir of people that you can go to for different resources, and that's the opportunities that you get from being at, one of those universities, is that you get access to those people and you immediately have some sort of instant connection with them, or something that you can tie yourself to. Like, I sat in a panel for an hour and I heard you talk, and this, something you said in particular, insert what it is, really resonated with me, and I would like to discuss that more. Like, do you have 15 minutes over Zoom? You would be shocked with the amount of people who actually say yes when you send that email. And I mean, people are going to say no. Yeah. Some people are going to say no. Some people will ignore you. Um, but more people say yes than you would think. And the ones who say yes are the biggest, make the biggest impact in your life. And the ones who ignored you or you say no, you honestly forget about in the long run.
So, with that being said, um, how how was it with managing or approaching your mental health? You mentioned that you've used resources on campus. Um, how did it feel confronting or going to those certain departments and asking for assistance? What advice would you have for students who are new on campus, who are entering a university and don't know where their resources are at? What advice would you have for them to, use their resources?
Yeah, I think my number one piece of advice is don't be scared to ask for help, period. Um, because when you ask for help, there's so many resources that are available at these universities. And when you ask for help, you will have someone that can connect you to one department, and that one department can connect you to somewhere else. And, but they need to know how to help you, and they need to know what your needs are. And I think it's really easy for someone who is from a first gen background to be scared to admit that they are struggling with something. And because that is not how we were trained to operate, we are trained to show strength, not weakness. And we're in constant survivor mode. But you just have to let that go. Um, because there are safe spaces on these campuses where you can talk to other people. And if you're scared to talk to an administrator who's literally there to help you, I mean, a lot of schools now have actually like first gen departments or first gen organizations, or they'll have like paid administrators on campus who are there to actually help you. And that didn't exist when I was there. I wish that existed when I was there. Um, but there's just been so much that's happened in the last couple of years to really make resources available to first gens. But it could be as easy as, going to a Latino student assembly meeting and talking to a senior who's been through it before. Um, Talking to someone in student services, talking to, and it just depends what the ask is and what you need help with. They know where all the resources are, they know where all the money is. So if you can't pay your bill because your parent recently lost their job, or because you're struggling to put food on the table, and someone you're speaking to knows actually there's a free food bank for students that's specifically for students, so you can get so much worth of groceries and not pay a dime. Actually, there's certain payment plan options through housing that you could take advantage of. Actually, there are certain subsidies that are for students facing particular hardship, and there's money set aside. You just have to talk to this person and apply this way. And if you don't ask, no one's going to be able to help you. And that's one of the biggest takeaways I've had. And honestly, I lost track of that as I got older. And that's kind of part of what happens in the next part of your life. But I was so good about doing that at that point in my life. And I think that's really what helped me get through the USC, and I did really well there. And it was because I had a bunch of people helping me, and I was trying to soak in every opportunity and resource I could get. And I was like, and part of this is because that UCLA program would tell me about it. They had this phrase called like OPM, other people's money. And I like
Mhm.
lived by that mantra, especially at USC. I'm like, USC has a ton of money. So if you see people at UCLA are telling me to spend other people's money, like I'm definitely going to do that. So I, got the grants to be able to do internships I wanted to do. And, if there was a grant to subsidize your laptop, I did that. If there was a grant that would pay for my flight so I could go do Harvard to attend an immigration conference, like I applied for it. And I just didn't let the threat of being rejected get in my way, I like went into every situation thinking that I had a chance at it. And the more that I got bites, like the more I believed in it. And that really propelled me into it. And a lot of that is the basis for why I am the way I am today, because so many people helped me throughout that process. I really do feel an obligation to pay it forward because I understood the impact that that had on my life.
Wow. And being around other individuals really did help you, stepping out of your comfort zone. Like you mentioned, asking those questions that needed to be asked.
Yeah.
Wow, I think a big point you bring is networking. How or did you know the skills to network, or did you just learn along the way?
I think I'm naturally an extroverted person. So I do think I went into it with a little bit of an advantage in that sense. Like I had a little bit less fear. But I mean, I think being part of a first gen, you always have a fear that you're going to say something dumb or that you have nothing to relate to the conversation, because I did not go on the fancy trip to Tahiti, or I don't play golf and I don't understand. I don't know who some of the fancy people who you were talking about are. Uh, but it's something that you just slowly work your way towards, and like you kind of can take baby steps. So all of these universities have these amazing events that get put on, so you can take baby steps by like, you know what, I'm going to show up to an event and maybe I won't say anything at this event, but I'm just going to listen. I'm going to listen to what everyone says, and I'm going to look to see how the professionals are responding to the students and like what kind of questions are they asking, how are they following up, right? And if you're a freshman or a sophomore, like it's okay, like you're not in any rush to do anything, you're starting to observe the skill. And then maybe it's like, okay, I'm going to go to this event and I'm going to try to talk to one person, and I'm going to talk to a fellow classmate. And then it's like, you know what? I know this friend is really extroverted, so I'm going to go with this person and I'm going to have this person help me like get an introduction with someone else. I would do that for my friends all the time. My friends were a little like, I would definitely be the wing woman and I would, introduce myself, and then I would introduce like my friends, and that was a good way for them to interact with the person. Even if I had no agenda, like I went to like pre-med receptions, even though I had no interest in being a doctor, but it was because I was trying to help a friend out, and, I'll drink my glass of wine and, let them talk. But there's just skills that you build along the way. And, once you start seeing the benefits of it, like once you start seeing that your people are responding back to your follow-up emails, like I had a friend who was like, can you send me like a sample email of like what you would send someone after a reception? It's like, yeah, this is a sample email. And, sharing those resources. I just found that to be really helpful. And what's unfortunate is now that I'm on the other side of it, now I'm on the side of the professional, I'm actually really disappointed by how many people I meet at these events that I will like give them my business card and I will tell them to email me, and they don't. And I don't understand why. Like I don't understand the fear, especially when someone affirmatively tells you to do it. And those who have end up benefiting so much from it. Like I've been able to help people get jobs. I've been able to connect them with other people. I've been able to do like practice interviews with them. And I think a lot of it's based off of fear, and I get that. And I like, if I ever write a book one day, I think the title of my book is going to be, but what if they say yes? Because I think that should just be the mantra. Like, yeah, people can say no or people can ignore you, which is, if there very few times when people actually say no, most of the time they'll just like ignore the email. If they're not going to respond to you. But like, what if they say yes? And there's a shocking amount of people who do say yes. And it only takes one opportunity to lead to your next opportunity, to lead to your next opportunity, to then allow you to be in the position that you need to be in. And you may be scared, but I can assure you that the entitled person that comes from privilege has no fear about asking someone else for help, because they won't even ask for help. They'll ask for the opportunity because they may feel entitled to it. And that's the
Mhm.
big difference, is that the ask is going to be made. The question is, who is going to make the ask? And you are
Mhm.
just as entitled to make that ask as the other person.
Very much so, very much so. I do. I really appreciate that information, especially in how viewing in regards to entitlement of even asking for the opportunity. Or so, dealing with imposter syndrome. Did you know what it was? Did you how did you address it, if you even knew how to acknowledge that you were dealing with it?
Yeah. I mean, I at one point I figured out what it was, like especially as I got into studying more about diversity and equity. Um, but it's just a feeling, right? Like it's not
Hmm.
even something that could be defined, right? It's honestly like a feeling, because everyone feels imposter syndrome differently, because they will feel like an imposter for a different reason, because there's so much intersectionality that's kind of built into that. Um, and I think I mean, it's hard. It's really really hard, because there are so many times that you questioned how you made it into the room, and did you actually deserve to make it here. And I think the time I felt that the most was probably when I was in law school, and I had gotten this job at this, this type of law firm. It's called Big Law, which is, you're at an international firm that's like ranked, and they have offices all across the world, and they're notoriously hard jobs to get, and they're also notoriously jobs that will limit their reach to primarily the top 14 law schools in the country. And I intentionally did not go to one of those law schools because I wanted to take the money to have a full tuition scholarship. And part of that was because I never had any expectation that I would make big law money, because I had no expectation that I would even be considered for a large law firm. And so when I started getting those offers and like accepting those positions, I felt completely isolated. I mean, there are not a lot of people that look like you who are there. Um, there were not a lot of people who went to my law school that were there. And so there's just like multiple layers of why I wouldn't necessarily feel like at in place there. But little by little, you just kind of have to have people who are your cheerleaders at the firm. And for me, I was able to find mentors really early on. And I mean, I have to tell you, the higher you get, the thinner the pool of people of color, especially women of color. And it doesn't always have to be another woman of color that gets you where you want to go. It just could be another person who's just invested in your career and who cares, and you do really good work for them, and they want to, bring you up because you make their life easier. So they want you to stay, because having to train someone else, it is much more difficult. Um, but like, you can start with low hanging fruit, and that might be the woman of color. I mean, there was this one partner in particular who I still talk to her to this day, even though I'm not at the firm. And she really, despite how busy she was, like she really did go out of her way to give me resources. And I would ask her the question of like, who else should I speak to? Like, and she would be like, you need to talk to this person, this person, and this person. And then I would email that, hey, I just started at the firm. This person said I need to speak to you. And if they know that this person thinks you need to connect, they're going to be like, okay, there's some credibility there, right? Like you feel more comfortable because you're not just like going at it alone. You have kind of the backing of a sponsor. And like it did not take her any effort. Like I literally just had to use her name, right? And then she gave me the grace to do that. And it that's how it really starts. And then suddenly your network gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And it becomes a lot easier to feel confident in your space. And then you start getting wins. Like, and I had, people telling me you need to go for the wins. You need to stop apologizing in emails. You are entitled to this. So, go for it if you want it. And I was not scared to ask for things when I needed them, when I knew it would support me and make me a better employee. And, Big Law gets a really bad rap normally, but I have to tell you that for me, at least where I was, I felt incredibly supported. And there were just so many resources that were available to me that I would have never had at another job. And I'm really happy I didn't self-select myself out of that opportunity, at that time, like, when I was in law school, because I could have easily not applied, even though I had the grades for it. And it's because I was willing to take a chance, and I'd already kind of built those networking skills in undergrad, and a lot of that I did carry on to, the firm. And then frankly, some of those connections I made when I was an undergrad helped me with the connections I was eventually able to make at the larger law firms. So, I mean, it all kind of goes together. Like my roadmap for USC was very similar to my roadmap when I first started law school, as I would go to the events, and academics were important to me, but they were not the most important thing to me. The most important thing to me was experiences. And it all kind of went together. When you do things that make you happier, you will perform well on everything else. And like when you know what your strengths are, you will like make decisions based off those strengths. And you're just setting yourself up for success when you do that.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate all that information. I think it's crucially important to give this information to the first gen community to, actually jot down and just look at where they should, start and begin just having that, like you mentioned, that roadmap. I did want to ask an important question, and it's one that I usually ask. What's one tip, if you have one? Because you have shared a lot of good tips. If you had one specific tip to share to the first gen community, first gen students, what would that tip be?
Yeah. My biggest tip would be remember your story. Never lose track of your story. And because when you know your story, you're able to have a good grasp of your values and what your actual goals are and what your strengths are. And revisit that story frequently. And as you start getting those wins, put them into a particular place. Have a folder in your computer called like a brag folder, or something in your email account. And I literally now have a folder. It's called brag. And whenever you get a win, and just put it in there, because you're going to face some really, really difficult times. And you need to be able to have an easy place to go back and remind yourself of who you are and the things that got you to the point you're in now. And, before we were talking about, before we got on this interview, I had like showed you this one video that I had seen on TikTok a couple of weeks ago from Selena Gomez. And then, we'll play one right now.
I had to stop because I had everything and I was absolutely broken inside. And I kept it all together enough to where I would never let you down, but I kept it too much together to where I let myself down.
Yeah, so when I saw that video, I broke down in tears, because for me, it represents so much. Pretty much in 18 seconds, Selena Gomez used the perfect words to describe the first gen experience, and the risks that are involved when you are in constant survival mode. And, anyone who's a first gen student knows what that feeling is like, feeling in survival mode. And when you don't take care of yourself, no matter what opportunities come your way, you're not going to feel kind of that satisfaction, because like her, like I felt a couple of months ago, like that I had everything. I had the kid, the husband, the house, the fancy job, the financial stability that I had kind of always dreamed of, but I was completely broken. Mentally and physically, I was deteriorating. But from the outside, most people would not have seen that. Because I wouldn't let them, because you are trained to not let people see your weakness, and you are trained to not disappoint other people. So you will do everything in your power to get the deadlines met, to help still go to the networking events, to still have, multiple mentees, because they're going through their own stuff and you don't want them to suffer like you did. So you want to help them, to balance family and make sure you're taking care of all of that, to take care of the older generation, which presents a completely new set of challenges, especially for first gen, because you want to make sure you're taking care of them, because they sacrifice so much for you to get to where you are today. And the weight of all of that, it really takes a toll on you, and you're not able to help yourself. And then when you do that, you are slowly but surely are always living on the edge. And it really just takes one bad thing happening to just make it all kind of topple down. For me, after COVID, I developed long COVID symptoms, and it was debilitating. It completely took me out of commission, and it's really hard to confront. And it's when you're already on the edge, it's really easy for that to kind of all come together. And when you're a first gen student and professional, it becomes even more difficult, because you feel like you don't have anybody that you can go to. Because if you've achieved this level of success, you think that other people are going to think you're ungrateful, because if they would have killed to be in your position and you're complaining about it, like, you didn't deserve it to begin with. Like, why are you complaining? Like, you have it, just suck it up and deal with it. And that's just the mentality that's always been built in. So you don't feel like you can talk to people within your community necessarily, but you also don't necessarily feel like you can speak to other people who share similar professional experiences, because they don't understand the cultural implications that come with it. And the advice that they give is without that cultural context. And that is just not helpful. And I had, like her, like I had to stop. Like I had to, for the first time in a long time, prioritize my mental health and prioritize my goals. And I'm still in the process of healing, but it all came down to remembering my story. And I had to go back for it. I had to pull my old personal statement from USC. I had to pull my personal statement from law school, and I read that. I was going through my old emails, and it's been a months-long process of really figuring out like who I am, what was driving me back then, and identifying like what were the times in my life that I felt the happiest or the most resilient or the most successful, and what was I doing during those times, and what strengths was I really working on during those times. So, I mentioned earlier that I've been giving daily bar exam tips on TikTok, and I've been also doing some YouTube videos on bar exam tips. And the reason I am doing that is because, although this sounds crazy, I think I was the most put together and resilient during the bar exam. And I took care of myself. I mentally had things going together. I would say affirmations every day. I would write in a gratitude journal every day. I was training myself substantively, but I was training myself mentally to get ready for that test. And I think that made all the difference, because like I said before, I was notoriously bad at standardized tests. And so I was terrified about the bar exam. But at that point, I had the job locked in. I was graduating with honors from law school. And I'm like, I am not going to let this test get in the way of what I deserve, because I've worked too hard for this and I just need to pass it. So I put all my resources into making myself mentally and physically the strongest I could to pass that test. And so many things got in my way. I got into a car crash the week before the bar exam. That was really bad. I lost a tooth and like was going to show up like a hillbilly, but I got that fixed. And I was calm during the bar exam. I just was. And I'm so proud of myself. So even though I'm giving these daily tips, part of this is my therapy. Part of this is my healing and reminding. And when I'm giving advice to other people, part of it is reminding myself what I did to keep myself strong, because I need to do that now. And I need to do that on a daily basis. What gives you energy? What makes you happy? And you really if you've lived a lot of life, you need to go back to your story to figure out what that is and reconnect. And the last couple of months have been me reconnecting with friends, me like reminding myself what I was strong in. I used to not network as much when I was super busy, right, at the firm. And I would say no to certain networking events because I didn't want to do it and have time to do it. As I've come out of my shell more, as I've been kind of rediscovering who I am and what made me happy and starting to act on those strengths again, what's crazy is that, and I'm not that big on manifesting, but like it kind of has been that like the things I've always wanted to do have somehow found me in the last couple of weeks or months, even the job I'm in now, which was the job I thought I was going to law school for. It found me when I found myself. And I wish I didn't let myself go that long without reconnecting with my story. And I want other people to have some sort of system for them to do kind of those check-ins. And I mean, that's kind of what I'm working on. So like ideally at one point I would like to put out some sort of workbook or journal to kind of help people navigate through this process. And it's still, a work in progress because I'm still working on it. But that's what I'm hoping to be able to do, is to provide other people with those resources so that they're able to reconnect with themselves and not lose themselves in the process and be the strongest versions of themselves they can be. So reconnecting with your story is the number one piece of advice I have for first gens.
I wanted to say thank you and congratulations on all the work you have done. And my last question to you is to ask what you would like to see with the first gen community. What would you like to put back into it? What's the big picture?
I want to do two things. One is to provide transparency as to the struggles of first generation students. I think that's something that's happening more now in the creator space, but I do think there's a little bit of a void in terms of what happens for people who are further into the profession, who are out of school, who are having to make their adulting decisions. They're having to balance taking care of older family members, kids, your mentees that you have in the professional space. And a lot of this was to scale the impact that I could make, because I do have mentees in my profession, but at the same time, I only have a limited amount of time. And I need to make sure I'm taking care of myself. So if there's a way in which I can scale the resources I provide and the mentorship I give, I think this is a good platform to do that. And I'd love the idea of partnering with other creators, other experts in the field on creating resources so that first generation students and students of color have a place they can go to access free or low cost resource to build that resiliency and to find the resources they need to kind of make it through, because it's hard. And if I can make someone else's life easier, then that is worth it for me. And like, I have a job. I love my job. I love the power I have in being an attorney and helping other people with that title and that degree. So I'm not looking to do this full time. So because of that, I need to make this something scalable. And that's what's amazing about these collaborations. that it allows me to work with people who are already engaged in the space to see how we can combine resources to make an impact, but at the same time live our own lives separate from social media and be able to work on our own identities and our own professional successes.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that. And I'm grateful to see all the work that you'll be doing. And I'm excited to see how far we can go with partnering and working together to create more content for students like myself, but also make an impact with a lot of the resources and the physical copies that I will see near in the future that you will be providing.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And I can't wait to turn the table on you and ask you questions.
Oh, wow. Okay, awesome. I know how.
That'll come up. That'll be soon. You have your own story to tell, and it's equally as valuable as mine.
Thank you.
That's for another day.
Oh, yeah. And thank you. And I appreciate that. And I know for sure from this interview, I've learned the power of story. Definitely.